morning, Madam Clerk. Do we have a quorum on the call? Madam Clerk?
Yes, I'm here. No, we do not.
Okay, please alert me when we do.
Will do.
What's up, bro?
Madam President, we now have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, everyone. The special meeting of the Richmond City Council is now called to order. Madam Clerk, if you would please read the electronic meeting announcement, and if that would then be followed by the roll call.
Yes, Madam President. Before we begin this morning's meeting, I must state the following for the record. This meeting is being held as an electronic meeting pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 2020-093, adopted April 9th, 2020. Notice of this meeting was provided to the public by means of a public information advisory issued on June 26, 2020, as well as through Legistar on the city's website in accordance with our usual practice. In order to identify each member of the council who is present electronically for this meeting, I will now call the roll. Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones? Ms. Robertson? Ms. Robertson? Ms. Larson? Here. Ms. Lynch? Here. Ms. Gray?
Here.
Ms. Trammell? Mr. Addison?
Here.
Vice President Hilbert?
Here.
And President Newfield.
Here, Madam Clerk. Thank you. If there's if folks can mute their phones until they're speaking, that would be helpful. I'm getting some, thank you, back feed. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, if we could proceed with the reading of the papers, and then thereafter, I am in receipt of a resolution from the mayor, which I will ask that we have discussion in terms of addressing. Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Madam President, the introduction papers for today are as follows. The following legislation will be considered for recommendation at the July 21st Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee meeting at 1 p.m. An ordinance to provide for the removal of certain monuments on city-owned property, provide for the disposition of such monuments, and repeal an ordinance accepting the General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson Monument, adopted March 3rd, 1920, as authorized by Virginia Code. The following legislation will be considered for recommendation at the July 23rd Governmental Operations Standing Committee meeting at 12 p.m. To establish an ordinance to establish a task force on the establishment of a civilian review board to review and provide recommendations concerning the creation of such board. The following legislation will be considered for recommendation at the July 2nd Education and Human Service Standing Committee meeting at 2 p.m. A resolution to request that the CAO cause to be established a work group including certain employees of the city and a member of City Council to develop a plan and recommendations for the implementation of a Marcus Alert program by October 1st, 2020. The following legislation will be considered for recommendation at the July 16th Finance and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting at 1 p.m. A resolution to request that the CAO cause to be prepared and submitted to the Finance and Economic Development Standing Committee a quarterly report that provides certain data relevant to the city's 5 civil asset forfeiture special funds for the purpose of increased oversight of the sources and the uses of civil asset forfeiture special funds. A resolution to request that the CAO cause to be prepared and submitted to the council and the mayor a report identifying funding in the fiscal year 2021 general fund budget and the fiscal year 2021 special fund budget appropriated to the Department of Police for mental health, substance abuse, and social service functions, and that provides recommendations for the reappropriation and transfer of such funding from the Department of Police to other city departments and to community mental health, substance abuse, and social service programs designed to perform such functions. The following legislation will be considered for recommendation at the July 28th Public Safety Standing Committee meeting at 12 p.m. A resolution to request that the CAO calls the Department of Police to revise its policies to ban the use of certain non-lethal weapons to control unlawful assemblies. Madam President, that concludes the reading of the introductory papers for today.
Well, we have no idea what's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Then members, I have and am in receipt of, as are you, a resolution from the mayor for expedited consideration. And so I just got this morning, and so did you. And so I believe the mayor is on if you want to speak to that, and then I'll ask Mr. Brown about how we would, if we could, be able to address such a matter today. So, Mayor?
Oh, thank you, Madam President. And I have a few remarks I wanted to provide to the council on the piece of legislation that should be in your inboxes, and I believe everyone has. Madam President, it is time. It's time to put an end to the lost cause and to fully embrace the righteous cause. It's time to replace the racist symbols of oppression and inequality, symbols that have dominated our landscape, with symbols that represent some of the best in all of our people, ones that reflect the diverse, inclusive, and equitable city we are today and continue to strive to be. Frankly, Madam President, it's time to heal. And that is why today I'm asking for your expedited consideration and unanimous approval of a resolution to support the immediate removal of Richmond's monuments to the lost cause. My administration is ready to make this happen, to turn this page in history, beginning today. I bring this opportunity before you for 2 reasons. First, failing to remove the statues now poses a severe, immediate, and growing threat to public safety. For the last 33 consecutive days, people have been gathering in large numbers in our city. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to surge, the protesters attempt to take down Confederate statues themselves or confront others who are doing so, the risk grows for serious illness, injury, or even death. We have an urgent need to protect the public. And second, it's just time. Since the end of Richmond's official tenure as the capital of the Confederacy some 155 years ago, we have been burdened with that legacy. The great weight of that burden has fallen on our minority residents, our people of color in this city, but also placed a weight on all of our brothers and sisters who saw the unmet potential for Richmond to become an international example of a diverse, compassionate, and inclusive community. These statues, although symbolic, have cast a dark shadow on the dreams of our children of color. By removing them, we can begin to heal and focus our attention on our future. In March, the General Assembly passed an amendment empowering Richmond to remove these statues. The law took effect today. It provides for a 60-day administrative process during which the city will welcome public input as we determine the ultimate fate of the statues. Today, we meet to set the schedule for such a process. While we go through this process set by the General Assembly, it is of utmost importance that we protect the health and safety of both persons and property. I will work with you to create an approach that is inclusive and community-driven, we can and must conduct that process while the statues are removed and placed in temporary storage. We are confident in our legal authority to proceed immediately to remove the statues. Joining me today are some of the many veteran Virginia attorneys who are unanimous in their conclusions that we have such authority. There's nothing in the law taking effect today requiring that during the process of determining where the statues are ultimately placed, that they must remain on their pedestals. In addition, multiple acts of this council and the governor provide such authority. In 2017, this council adopted the City of Richmond's Emergency Operations Plan and named Richmond's mayor as the Director of Emergency Management. And on May 29th, City Council consented to my declaration of emergency relating to the recent civil unrest. 2 days later, on May 31st, the governor issued an executive order proclaiming a state of emergency in Richmond for the same reasons. Yesterday, he extended that order through at least July 30th. Section 41-146.21, Section C of the Code of Virginia and the city's Emergency Operations Plan specifically authorizes the Director of Emergency Management to protect the health and safety of persons and property. It further allows me to bypass certain time-consuming administrative procedures like a 60-day waiting period, especially when an open public process can be conducted while the statues are in storage. But the world has changed in the last month. Monuments have become lightning rods for almost daily confrontations that threaten public health and safety. I believe it's my duty as the mayor of this great city to act now to immediately remove these statues. I want to thank all the Richmonders and Virginians, young and old, who have come out over the last month to exercise their First Amendment rights, crying out against the injustice embodied in certain statues in our great city. They call for reconciliation, equality, healing, atonement, and change that is long overdue. And let me be clear, these changes are not limited to Monument Avenue. This moment presents great opportunity for you as local leaders and for us as a city. Just as we're transforming the city's landscape, we must transform the racist systems that long have held back Black Richmonders. We will replace these symbols not only with new artworks that inspire and reflect our values as a city, but with lasting monuments to justice and equity, new schools, safe and healthy affordable housing, opportunities for economic empowerment. So let us move forward together, remembering what Dr. King once said, Madam President, never, never be afraid to do what's right. Today you have a chance to do just that, the chance to start a new era in our shared history, a history based on a resounding cry for justice and unified stand against intolerance. Madam President, for public safety's sake, for our city, for our history, we can be proud to join me in supporting immediate removal of all the Confederate monuments in the city of Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I will ask Mr. Brown about the process by which this resolution could be entertained, if you would, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, you are still muted.
Apologize for that. Good morning, Madam President and members of council and Mr. Mayor. I have not had an opportunity to review the resolution in its entirety, but there are some procedural issues that I need to make the council aware of. First, the agenda for this meeting does not include as an agenda item a motion to consider a resolution by expedited consideration. What this means is that pursuant to section 4.06 of the charter, the council is not actually permitted to consider and vote on such a resolution at this meeting. It says specifically, the notice of each special meeting shall contain a statement of the specific item or items of business to be transacted and no other business shall be transacted at such meeting except by the unanimous consent of all the members of the council. So that would mean all 9 members of the council would have to consent just to get this on the agenda, so that the usual expedited consideration vote, 6-vote majority, could take place, and the resolution could be lawfully before the council. So, and another thing that I noticed, even though I haven't had time, I'm sorry. Oh, now, am I creating an echo? No. I apologize for that. Another thing to note is that the resolution that I believe was emailed to you does not have approved as to form and legality by the city attorney on it, and that's because we first saw it 23 minutes before this meeting when you all got it. So I do not know whether it would ever be possible to approve that text as to form and legality at this point, but ultimately the body will have to consider whether that's something that it wants to have when it considers legislation that's before it.
So, Mr. Brown, could I just be clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So if this can't be considered today because it's on special, this was a special meeting with documents delineated, when could it be considered?
It could be considered
Such that, we know we don't have all 9 today. When could it be considered? What's the soonest, such that the membership who are present, if they're amenable, could vote on this?
Yes, ma'am. The council could schedule another special meeting in accordance with its rules of procedure and the charter. That's, at least 24 hours notice of the meeting, and for the purpose of expediting and considering this resolution. And that is pretty much the soonest that the council could, in fact, consider something like this.
And so could this be something, okay, so we're a special meeting, even if that's before OD or tomorrow, whenever, and then whatever the majority vote is at that meeting, could the majority of folks could take action at that meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The charter requires at least 24 hours notice be provided, and the agenda items be included on that notice.
Okay.
So it could be 24 hours, after the meeting is noticed to all members.
Okay.
Madam President.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stoney, I think I saw a few hands.
Madam President, may I ask a question to you,
Yes.
Madam President? Madam President, I'm looking at the City of Richmond's agenda, the City Council. The only thing I see on the agenda states the introduction of legislation, and it says legislation related to monument removal and police reform. That's all I see here, and the legislation that I've forwarded to you also is germane to monument removal.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I think what you are asking for here, and what I'm trying to get closure on, is whether or not action can be taken, and I'll ask Mr. Brown to speak to that piece, even if it can be introduced. You've asked for expedited consideration of this item, and so I'm trying to get clarification on path forward. I'm not taking issue with, but as much as path forward for this body relative to this paper that's just come forward today. Mr. Brown, if you'd speak to that, and then members, if you have questions, and then let's see if we can talk
Yes.
about how we move forward here.
Yes, ma'am. That is true. The council could decide to consider the paper introduced today, but it could not vote on the paper until a subsequent special meeting called for that purpose.
Okay. All right. Members, any further clarification, questions, comments?
Madam President.
Ms. Lynch.
Um,
I'm sorry, then Ms. Gray. Ms. Lynch?
Madam President, I'm disappointed that there's not a path forward to vote on this resolution today. And I would agree with the mayor that the the resolution that he is bringing before us is germane to the agenda. And I guess that's an argument for another day, if we're not going to put this resolution before the body for a vote. If we do not take a vote on this resolution, I would like to make a motion that we at least, on the record, give an official vote of support for the resolution and for the intent and the spirit of what our mayor is trying to do under the guise of emergency authority. And I would like to bring that motion to the table for a vote.
Okay, I'd like to, if you would hold on that, I think, Ms. Gray, and then I'll come back.
Well, first, as my understanding is that a special meeting can't contain motions that were not publicly disclosed prior. Is that correct?
According to Mr. Brown, but the point is also that, and the mayor made comment, and Mr. Brown can reference that, it sounds as if it would be possible, given the delineation of the agenda, to possibly have the paper introduced today.
I'm talking about the motion that's on the floor right now.
Okay, I'm just clarifying.
Just a point of order. I just want to make sure whether or not there is a motion on the floor that needs to be seconded or not before I speak.
There is a motion. Why don't we go on and proceed, and then we can have discussion. I thought you had a question before.
Permissible motion based on our charter.
You do
Yeah,
what?
yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you, Ms. Gray. Could you repeat?
I'm asking if, based on the charter, we can introduce things that were not specifically stated in the announcement of the special meeting, whether or not a motion can be entertained at this time.
I think I can answer that. The answer, Ms. Gray, is you are correct. Motions like this, or like a motion to expedite, this resolution, for example, which were not on the agenda, are not items of business that can lawfully be transacted at this particular meeting. That's what our city charter says.
So I think if there's a question of consensus, I'm fine with that. But I'm okay with speaking if there's no motion that we're entertaining right now.
Madam President, I would.
Ms. Lynch, if I'm understanding correctly from Mr. Brown, a motion cannot be made relative to this item. Is that?
Then I would rescind that and ask for consensus, yes.
And what would the consensus be? Could you be clear?
The consensus
Go on.
The consensus to support the mayor's resolution, the spirit and intent of what he is trying to do.
Okay. Other members, questions, comments, and Ms.
I
Gray.
still haven't made my
I'm sorry,
question or
Ms.
comment.
Gray.
So I stated before, and I will state again, I understand the need to move in the most expeditious manner. But when we took our oath, we took an oath to uphold the laws of the Constitution and the charter of the city. It is very important to me, as I've seen that laws are being discriminately enforced throughout our city, as we see things that are going on currently. We are lawmakers. It is important for us to stand on what is right within the law. And I'm all about a legal means, and I said it last week, I'll say it again, a legal means of expediting the process. If there is a way, and if our attorneys can work through this and find a legal means to expedite this process, I am 100% in support of that. I am not in support of ignoring laws because they're laws that we don't like. Because when we start ignoring laws that we don't like, we open a very dangerous precedent of how we move forward as a democracy and as a people.
Other members?
Madam President?
Well, Ms. Lynch, can I come back to you? Because it's not a response thing. I'd like to have other members, and then I'll definitely come back to you. Are there other members who'd like to comment?
Dr. Newbell,
Ms. Larson?
just a question for the administration. Is there any, with the removal, is there an estimated cost? And do you have any information for us on where the funds are coming from if you do move forward with an emergency temporary removal of the monument.
Madam President, the funds would,
Mr. Mayor, yes.
Madam President, the funds would come from the DPW budget that began on July 1 today, roughly $1.8 million. The city would be reimbursed because of the private effort going on outside the city, a philanthropic effort to raise dollars to cover the cost to the city.
Thank you. Mr. Hilbert.
Just to follow up real quick.
I'm sorry, Ms. Larson, I thought you had completed.
And is that the fundraiser that I saw a day or two ago asking for donations to go to the Maggie Walker Fund? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Hilbert. Oh, okay. You are muted, Mr. Hilbert.
And then I unmuted myself and muted myself again. Okay, here we go. Well, first of all, here I'd like to contribute to that fund here, certainly to make sure that we move forward as a city. So count me in.
How much?
Check on my bank account to see how much I can get in there, but I'll certainly make a contribution. The second thing here, and I think that answers a very important question, but let me go back to Mr. Brown's question of, okay, because I think the notice was written wide enough to where the resolution fits in with that to be introduced. I guess is the fine point that we said we would introduce legislation, but we were not voting on anything. Is that the difference that would prevent us from voting on this without all 9 members approving and we only have 7 of us present? Is that?
Yes, Mr. Hilbert, I believe you've distilled it fairly well. It's the vote to expedite and the vote on the paper of the merits itself that are items of business that are not present on the agenda.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that, and I'll try and get my checkbook in hand and get us rolling. Thank you.
So, Mr. Brown, I want to be clear, though, that the paper could be introduced. Is that correct?
If that's the council's will.
Okay.
Legal paper.
Say again? I'm sorry, heard.
Is the legal? I don't want us getting caught up in litigation because it hasn't been vetted through the normal process. I think if our legal team can review it and certify that there is a legal means to expedite the removal, then that's a paper I can support. I don't want to have us go round and round with a paper that hasn't been vetted the normal way through our city attorney.
Okay. Mr. Brown, how quickly could you vet this such that we could call for a special meeting to address this?
Honestly, I'm not sure because I haven't had enough time to even read it. I'm sorry, did I? Yes, honestly, I'm not sure because I haven't even had enough time to read it yet. I know that obviously our office hasn't had anything to do with this. It sounds like from the discussion that it is certainly contrary to legal advice that I provided previously, and I'm unaware of anything that would change that legal advice right now. My guess is that, if it were to be approved as to form of legality by our office, it might require significant changes. And ultimately, it's up to the council whether it chooses to vote on such a resolution, whether or not it's approved as to form and legality by our office or not. There is one instance that I can think of where that has, in fact, occurred. Only one. But ultimately, if the council chooses to introduce it, it could always be, stricken, replaced, amended, if necessary, to satisfy the council that it's something that the council would be comfortable voting on in light of any possible repercussions that might arise from adopting such a resolution.
So then this body could decision to introduce this paper today, and it could have opportunity for whatever subsequent review coming back to us. We need to notice it 24 hours, and then we could move forward. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Members, with that information, what's your pleasure?
Madam President.
Madam President.
I'd like to see us move forward with this. I would hope here that, I guess the Friday is an official holiday of the city, as I understand. I would like for, and we've held, usually don't hold meetings on city holidays, but I would ask if Mr. Brown could commit to us to try and get something done by the close of business tomorrow. And Madam President, I'd like to have a meeting on July the 4th, Independence Day. If we can do that, then I think that's most appropriate, that we bring some independence to the city from these racist monuments.
So let me be clear. Are you making a motion that we would, today, it's not a motion. Okay. So, but if I'm hearing you, to introduce this paper, call a special meeting at which time it would only require the members who are present to be able to vote on it as opposed to full out 9 members.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Members, what's your pleasure?
Well, as far as the July 4th date, I think in consideration of staff and their planning to be here or not, it's a bit inconsiderate of staff when they have had to, I don't know. I will make myself available. I just don't think that calling for our not very well paid staff to have to come in on a day off, a rightful holiday, is not the way I like moving legislation forward. If there's a faster way to do it, I'm in support of that. I just always try to consider that people have made plans and some are traveling, and to do that and at such short notice to staff is inconsiderate.
Well, we certainly have July 3rd. I mean, we have to have 24-hour notice. We certainly have the 3rd. I do hear you, Ms. Gray, and I don't disagree.
Madam President.
In terms of staffing. So we do have another option. So just to make note of that. And Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Madam President, permission to speak. I understand that, and I appreciate Councilman Hilbert, requesting the 4th of July, but I believe that Councilwoman Lynch has requested a consensus of support. We believe here, the administration believes that under our powers as the Emergency Management Director, Coordinator, that we have the ability to remove, and what we are requesting today is for the council to at least demonstrate its support in those powers of us moving forward. And albeit taking up you may not take up the resolution that I forward to you all today, I think consensus on this matter, a matter that involves the future and the current situation here in the city, matters. And so that's what I would firmly request.
So, Mr. Mayor, we did, in fact, introduce the paper because we are in agreement with you relative to removal of the statues. We came out of committee saying the parallel roads here are pathways. One would be certainly gearing up for the introduction of the paper today and consideration of any other legal options that would allow us to move more expeditiously in addressing this. So I think you have heard from us by virtue of the legislation that we just introduced. You're not hearing an unwillingness on this from this body to proceed, and I'm hoping that you hear that. The only question relative to this item is, for me, then what does this do? If we can introduce the paper, which is resoundingly speaking to the broader question, and then proceed with that.
Madam
Anyway, I'm
President-
not sure what consensus on, I'm not sure what that means, but I'll let certainly you speak, Mr. Brown, and then we'll all proceed. Mr.
Madam
Mayor?
President-
Yes.
Madam President, what I'm asking for consensus on, and I agree with Councilwoman Lynch, is the ability for us to proceed today. I believe that time is of the essence because of public safety. And waiting around another 24 hours, another 40 hours, or a week, I think puts public safety at risk. And what I'm asking for today is consensus from this council, the decision makers, the lawmakers, and the governing body of this city to step up and support our effort to remove monuments beginning immediately.
Right, Mr. Brown, or other council members, please don't, if you want to weigh in, I guess.
I'd like to weigh in. I also want to raise a point of order because the mayor is not a party to city council's body, and it is improper to allow for the mayor to engage in debate with our body. I do agree that within the legal means, and I continue to say that, within our legal authority, we should move expeditiously towards removal. And I think we've all said that, and we are looking for a solution towards that end. I am not in favor of ignoring laws, because laws are put in place to protect the public and to protect individuals in their civil liberties. And when we start ignoring laws that we think we don't agree with, we're going down a very scary path. I've seen it. I continue to say this. There are laws right now that are not being enforced, but they're being enforced for certain people who look certain ways, and other people get to walk around and terrorize our citizens. So I am all for legal means. I'm all for moving forward, and I will continue to state that. I am not for ignoring laws. If the mayor chooses, and it is within his powers as an executive to immediately remove these, if that's the advice he's getting from whatever legal counsel he's receiving, but if our legal is telling us that we cannot legally introduce and we cannot legally move forward at this point, then I cannot be for any legal process.
So I believe our council has said we can introduce, and so I'd like to make a motion that we introduce this paper today.
And
I'd
I
like to
agree
make
with
a
the
motion.
introduction. I'll second that.
Mr. Jones?
There's a motion on the floor, so I'd like to, I'd like to be able to speak to it, but there's a motion, so go ahead.
And I would like a proviso. I'm not talking about introducing and waiting weeks to decision. I'm talking introduction, the normal 24-hour noticing, and us getting back together, preferably not on the 4th. The 3rd is certainly an option, and moving forward, because I do hear the urgency here. At the same time, I'm wanting to make sure that we're consistent with councilmanic policies and procedures. So, Madam or
Dr. Newell?
Mr. Clerk, yes, Ms. Larson, further discussion?
Yeah, just a discussion regarding the introduction of this paper.
And then if I can, Madam President,
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Dr.
sorry, Mr. Jones, yes.
I'll defer to Councilperson Larson if I can speak on the motion after that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to note for scheduling purposes, there is an Education and Human Services meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I don't know if this is something that could be added to that agenda or scheduled before or after, but that is scheduled and we plan on meeting at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And just to speak to the actual introduction of the paper, I do agree with it being introduced. I have had concerns for several weeks now that there is a public safety issue in our city. I brought them up at GovOps last week and was then afterwards also concerned that we weren't moving fast enough in what we had discussed at that meeting and reaching out and contacting the state or whomever to find some sort of leniency to remove these statues temporarily to make sure that there is public safety in our city. Watching folks who are out there on the streets to try and tear them down on their own is so upsetting, and I'm so scared that something awful is going to happen to one of our citizens.
So I would like to make a modification then on the motion if it is that, so thank you, Ms. Larson, for number one, proposing what we've agreed to do is operate within the infrastructure of City Council. If, Madam Clerk, that meeting allows us a 24-hour notice, then I would ask, if council's amenable, that we would bring that paper to that committee for review, and you'll have to advise me, Mr. Brown, but certainly review and hopefully decisioning tomorrow afternoon. Would we have enough time to make notice to make that 24 hours? Madam, Mr. Clerk, I can't see where you are.
Madam President, I think it depends whether or not the law department has enough time to do what they need to do.
Well, we're talking about the 24-hour notice, and we're talking about the simultaneous review of legal, such that this could come to that committee with Ms. Larson is amenable. And again, we all appreciate the urgency. At the same time, we appreciate the process.
So if the council is calling a special meeting before the Education and Human Services Standing Committee meeting at 2 o'clock, we can notice that 24 hours in advance.
Okay. Motion on the floor, and then Mr. Jones, you're speaking.
And Madam President, a motion is not required to do that.
Okay, yes, I could call that. Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Madam President, 3 years ago, I introduced a paper calling for the removal of the statues. 3 years. It was birthed out of the struggle going on in Charlottesville, so I can't say I was the only one. I'm not. I wasn't the only one. I was the only one on council to introduce and to support it, along with Ms. Robertson. Then we went through the process of trying to reword it to get local control, because people just were not amenable to, nor could stomach the idea of the outright removal of. That failed. We gained control of, as Democrats, the General Assembly. So we brought it back forward. That still was not passed unanimously on council. We have been moving slow. I respect the fact of the wheels of government. I understand and appreciate the need to be the Virginia statespeople that we are. But we've been moving slow. In the words of my colleague from the 4th, we're moving slow right now. We are behind what's happening in the street, and we are allowing this to continue. I would not categorize it as terrorism. Would not categorize it as that. We are slow to move to the responses of the tragedies that are occurring in our country. This is not about a monument. We've got to move beyond statues and statements. We just simply do. And I'm the one that has fought for this. Our challenge as a council is, will we move to act to deal with symbols that approve and simply perpetuate the marginalization and the minimization of African American people? The people that are protesting right now, honestly, they really don't give a flip about monuments. But what they do care about is the fact that Black lives matter. And if that thread, if that the tonality resonates and bounces off and through the monuments and the statues, then they should be dealt with expeditiously. If we're talking about legal stance, if the mayor has the legal stance to just act unilaterally and take them down, sir, I say take them down. If it requires another action of council and we've got to call special meetings to get it through, then do that for the in the name of safety. I don't want police and protesters, Madam President, squaring off in front of statues. I don't want protesters or counter protesters who would want to see them remain be the center of this attention. The men and women that live on Monument Avenue, they deserve safe and peaceful neighborhoods. They have been willing, hold on, Madam President.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were coming.
They've been willing to open up doors to the young people out there. And this is what's not making the papers. They're out there opening up their doors to people they don't know in an effort to hand out water, to be a part of the movement and their expression thereof. And they are to be commended for it. If there is a pathway forward that is legal, because I would agree with Councilperson Gray, we are the legislative body and we just cannot thumb up our noses at what our legal team is saying. I would impress upon our legal team to find a legal means by which to find an expeditious pathway forward and move forward. If that means the mayor has the unilateral decision in the time of an emergency to act, then act. If it calls for, if he doesn't, and it requires another act of council to move expeditiously, then act. And then if we don't have that, then we got to wait 60 days. The law is the law. And so there's 3 areas by which I see, Madam President, council and or the administration can act. The administration can act based upon their interpretation of this time of emergency, then protect citizens of Richmond, period. And let the chips fall where they may. If it's going to take us joining in as a legislative body to join in, if it needs that, then we do that. And if we don't have it there, then Madam President, I'll see y'all in 60 days because I was here 3 years ago. So
Thank you,
we can join up and meet up anywhere along the way. But I just want men and women of Richmond, the families that live on Monument Ave and Franklin, to have peace and for the protesters to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And I want to be clear because I hear the urgency. I have made motion to introduce the paper. I am willing to call a special meeting such that within the 24-hour notice, we're within our guidelines, but we're also responsive. So I'm hoping you've heard that. And that's what's on the table. And so if in fact, special meeting 24 hours hence, whether it's in the context of our education committee, and it sounds like it needs to be a separate special meeting, but I am prepared to do that. I want to make sure you're hearing that. And so that's the motion.
That July 3rd has been designated by the mayor as a holiday as well. So if we can assess who has made plans to be in town or out of town, but as far as staff is concerned, I think we should.
Madam President?
I need to ask staff to stick around. Protesting is not going to stop just because it's a holiday.
Okay.
So as a council, we've got to act.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
Madam President.
I think still, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to get to closure here. I have a motion on the table to look at introducing this legislation today and to call a special meeting, and we can work through the specifics 24 hours hence just to accommodate the noticing so that we can then make decision. That's what's on the table.
Madam President.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Lynch, and then Mr. Mayor will come back to you.
Well, I'd like to, are we going to vote on that? I would just like to say, I will vote on that. I just feel that it is equally as important for us to do a consensus and go on record with our support of the mayor's resolution.
Okay. And duly noted, what I'm looking for is introduction of the paper, a special meeting within the 24-hour notice, so it can be more than a consensus. It can be a confirmed decision relative to the mayor's desired action, and clarity in terms of any concerns relative to council, etc., from legal perspective. That's what I'm looking for. That we are consistent with our infrastructure, with our guidelines, but that we also move swiftly.
And
Madam
Mr.
President.
Mayor.
Yes.
Madam President, and I appreciate that, and the administration appreciates that. In your, as the Director of Emergency Management, I'm here today to tell you that we are in a state of emergency. I recognize, as Councilman Jones said, that the wheels of government may turn a little slow. I think what Councilman Lynch just stated, today, I have the ability to do this through my emergency powers. All I'm asking today is for this city council, this body here in the city of Richmond, to support, the emergency manager doing what's necessary to keep people safe. By consensus would suffice.
I am not sure. Okay. I prefer by vote, Mr. Mayor. I hear you.
That's 4 more hours later, Madam President. That's why I think we need to act today, and we will act immediately.
Okay.
Madam President.
Duly noted. Ms. Gray, I think, is there? Ms. Gray, I can't see you, but okay.
Madam President, this is Candace Reed, the city.
Okay, Ms. Reed, yes.
A motion's not required to be voted on to introduce the paper. I just need to read it into record, and I need to be clear on the date and time of the special meeting of the City Council.
Okay. Okay. I would like to make sure I have consensus of the members that you are amenable and desirous of having this paper introduced.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that correct with all members?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Gray? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's proceed with that. I apologize in terms of the motion, but I was trying to have our path forward. Okay.
Now I will need to know if the intent is to hold a special meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. before Education and Human Services.
Would that give us the 24-hour notice that we need?
I think that will give us enough time to prepare the media notice and the agenda for tomorrow's special meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Madam President,
Yes.
what I heard Mr. Brown say was that he would have to determine, the legal status of the paper, and he couldn't determine a date by which he could do that. Has he stated that he can do that by 1 o'clock or whenever we're going to call this meeting, or does that not matter?
I think for what I am asking, because of the urgency here, is that he would proceed and get his team to take a look at this such that we could meet tomorrow and address this in a special meeting.
Did we hear an affirmative from Mr. Brown that could be possible?
Yes, Mr. Hilbert, I will be prepared to advise the council as to the form and legality of the paper that's being introduced.
So
okay,
then
we
I
only
would
have to do that at the meeting versus before we give the notice out.
I'll be prepared to do it at the time of the meeting that you're.
Okay, right. Wonderful. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
And Madam
Thank you
President,
very much.
Madam President, before we vote, can I just have a question for the city attorney. Mr. Brown, with the powers that come along with executive orders, and I understand we have not been. I don't think anyone in this on this call has been in a setting or a context like we're in today.
No.
And that is safe to say. Is a mayor within their right, and what are their limits, the limits of their authority to ensure the safety of the public? Because in essence, that's all the mayor's truly asking for, is that will council stand with him as he does what he believes is in the best interest of the public. We're not talking about destroying them or taking them down. And so if there was an area of our city that was flooded or was a danger to be in, it would be so easy to say, cordon off that area, make sure no one goes in. Let's ensure that citizens are safe and that no one can go in there. That's easy for flooding get that. Can that, so we have the analogy. What are his powers and what's amenable in this case? And will we as a council stand behind doing what's safe? Because again, the protests are not going to stop. They're not. And so I just want to know, within those powers, what a mayor can and cannot do.
Madam Chair, I have my hand up as well.
Okay, Mr. Brown, Ms. Gray, and then I'm going to bring this to closure because I think we have agreement. Paper's been introduced, special meeting tomorrow. We've asked Mr. Brown to review and be prepared to speak to. I think, again, we have conveyed through our introduction of the initial resolution our intent and desire relative to these statutes to have them removed and to have the process that allows for public input across the period that we both all agree, I'm sure, is longer than we would like, but certainly it is what's mandated. So, Mr. Brown, Ms. Gray, and then I'm going to push for us to decision and move forward.
And without trying to take up too much time, because I've already said previously that the emergency powers statutes do not give the authority to do not provide the mayor with authority to remove these statutes. So obviously any action to do that incurs legal risk on the part of the people who will be moving the statues. And that's, that is my advice. That continues to be my advice. I have not been provided with any citation or factual allegation that would prompt me to change that advice.
Madam
Thank you.
President.
And I think, was there another council member? And then Mr. Mayor, I'll come back to you. And then we're going to get closure, move forward relative to meeting tomorrow to decision on this paper and this resolution. Again, I emphasize that we are there by virtue of the paper we introduced on removal. It is just a matter of the process. Ms. Gray?
So just a couple of things to point out. I'm not sure if city dollars were used to pay this panel of attorneys, but if the mayor is willing to share any legal advice he's gotten from outside attorneys that may advise us on a legal path forward, I'm amenable to receiving that and looking into it with our attorney. I think that it's important, again, to stress the law. I don't believe the laws have been followed, and I would hope that my colleagues, I had an AR-15 wielded at my child in front of my home. I've had threats directly. The mayor has had his residence of record vandalized. We have had cars exploded in the neighborhoods, burned. We've had buildings burned down. I'm making a huge distinction, and protests don't bother me. I've been a protester. I support protest. The terrorism and the burned out buildings and the car explosions, laws need to be enforced to prevent that from continuing. The defecation in people's sidewalks and in their yards needs to be stopped. The assault rifles loaded with more than 20 loaded assault rifles and having more than 20 rounds in a magazine, those people need to be arrested. They should not be allowed to go around intimidating citizens of the city. So absolutely, but I need people to understand that what they're seeing may not be all factual and it may not be the whole story. There are people terrorizing our communities, and I am asking and I am begging for laws to be enforced against the terrorist acts that are being imposed upon citizens at these very moments.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. And this is Mr. Mayor. I'm going to summarize here because at this point, and I'm going to reference an item Ms. Gray mentioned. If there are legal advice that you can make available during this interim period, we would ask you to do that in tandem with our attorney. At this point, I'm going to ask to have this paper introduced. I'm going to call for one moment, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to call for the special the special meeting for within the 24-hour notice so that we're adhering to our guidelines. But whatever additional information got, feel free to share that amongst us. And so,
Madam President.
last comment, because then I'm moving forward.
Madam President, I can share with you this information right now. I have my
Mr.
legal counsel with me.
I got you. I have you, but we have all just, the paper's going to be introduced. The clerk has to read that. We're talking 24 hours, and I get it. We have a lot going on. Even after our statutes, we still have a major statute sitting there that, and I get it. Statutes are part of the discussion, but the broader issues in terms of social justice, racial equity, and equity, these are even broader issues that we're still going to have to take on. I get the concern, but I also get that we are obliged to operate within the guidelines of this body, and I'm looking for us to proceed while still observing the urgency that we're talking about here. We're talking to 24-hour notice. I'm sharing your person, sharing with that. There's enough time for us to get that, ask questions back of them, ask questions of our legal person. And so at this point, I'd like us to move forward. Members, if there are no other, Mr. Mayor,
Madam President, I was hoping that my legal counsel could speak to
Mr. Mayor, this is all in the moment. We're wanting to make good, informed decisions. We are with you in the need to remove these statutes. We're with you, but we're wanting to have opportunity for the appropriate public comment. We're wanting to have opportunity to be within the city council's guidelines. And I think this accomplishes that. We introduce it, we do the 24-hour notice that gives us time to talk to your persons and them to us, our legal counsel, and then proceed.
Madam President, we are still planning on, as is very typical for us on other matters, to gather consensus prior to things coming before the body. We are planning to do a consensus, correct?
This paper can be introduced. You've already indicated your consensus to introduce the paper. The paper will be read in. I am going to ask for a special meeting 24 hours hence so we can get benefit of all the legal counsel and make a decision and move forward. So at this point, Madam Clerk, whatever reading needs to be done, please do that, and we will proceed.
Madam President, I need to know the time that the council can meet. So is it 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. tomorrow?
Would persons be available?
Dr. Newell?
Yes.
In terms of scheduling for the Education Committee, 1 p.m. would be better because our meeting starts at 2 and we already have people scheduled to come and present to us.
Okay, so would members be amenable to meeting tomorrow at 1 for the special meeting?
Can you give me 30 seconds to check my calendar? I mean, I'll be there. The meeting is there. I'll cancel whatever I've got.
So we're talking about a intro today. The clerk will read in. Special meeting tomorrow at 1. An opportunity is the mayor's offer to hear from any legal counsel he's wanting to share with us during that period. Opportunity for Mr. Brown to review and give us benefit, and then to decision. Madam Clerk.
The City Council will hold a public hearing on the following legislation on Thursday, July 2nd at 1 p.m. A resolution to authorize the mayor of Richmond, in his capacity as Director of Emergency Management, to order the temporary removing and storage of certain statues in the city of Richmond, whose presence creates a public safety concern or necessitates their removal for their preservation on July 20, for the safety and health of the residents of Richmond and the protection of property. That concludes the reading of the additional intro paper.
Thank you. And so tomorrow, unlike today, had there been we would not have been able to take a vote because we didn't have all 9 members. But tomorrow, Mr. Brown, we can proceed. Is that correct, with the membership who are present based on the discussion?
If that's the council's will, a quorum can do so, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. With that, members, there is no other business before this body. Mr. Mayor, thank you, and all of you, members.